Hey folks, sorry, Mark, for the overwrite there.
It's always amusing watching all the cursors go to one particular spot and then start typing over each other.
Last edit wins.
That's right.
Yeah, and then I realized that I'm in the wrong Google account.
Well, that's a different issue.
Nobody likes video on these things. I'm gonna turn myself off so I'm not the only head.
Well, this is your first meeting. You have to stay on video.
Right.
I can't hide now.
That's right.
It's good that you erased your whiteboard, though. So at least you have security in mind.
It's like, what is it? When we actually met face to face, it's like what the newbie had to bring, like cookies or donuts or something. So I think the newbie on these things just had to be forced to be on video.
I'll keep it on then. Hey, look at that. More video.
It's just Arun showing off his awesome mustache for November.
Oh, crud. Is that what we're supposed to be doing? I forgot.
Well, this is the month of November, guys.
I always forget.
Oh, man. I just shaved last night, too.
I had a team that made me do a reverse Movember. They grew mustaches, and then at the end of it, they made me shave mine.
Oh.
I was thinking maybe they grew up all 11 months, but not in November.
All right, we'll give people just another minute or so. And since Zoom doesn't keep the agenda out there forever, there's another link to the agenda if you want to add your name. All right, I have 4 past the hour, so we might as well go ahead and get started. Should be a fairly quick call today. I was hoping to do more of a post-mortem from the TOC call, but unfortunately, I don't think we actually completed the discussion. They had actually, it was one of the more full TOC calls we've ever had. And unfortunately, that meant that for working group updates, Ken only had, I think, 5 minutes or less in order to present the serverless stuff. And he actually managed to squeeze most of it in, or all of it in actually, under time. But unfortunately, what that didn't leave time for was a discussion about possible next steps. Like, for example, how does the TOC feel about us looking at eventing and stuff like that that we've all talked about? So I've asked Chris to add us to the agenda for next week's call. And just for you guys, for those who don't know, normally they meet every 2 weeks, but because of Thanksgiving coming up, they decided to shift it and have the week of Thanksgiving's call next week on Tuesday. I believe it's 11 a.m. Eastern. So I've asked Chris to add us back to the agenda just so we could finish up that discussion, see how the TOC feels about us continuing some of the work that we proposed, and give people a chance to actually comment on what Ken presented, because I don't think anybody spoke up, whether that was simply because they had nothing to say or because everything, or because they ran out of time. It's a little unclear. So we'll give people a chance to speak up then.
Although I did feel that Brian Grant had very positive things to say that the eventing is a good direction for us to go next.
Yep, I agreed. Yes.
I think that was the sentiment. That was the same sentiment I left with as well. Moreover, of the other work groups that the other work groups that I spend time in, and I guess technically this isn't a work group, but is in the open metrics effort, that we, on our last call earlier this week, we were acknowledging really the need for us to have an events format as well. And so, so that quote unquote working group is also potentially looking to descend upon the eventing format effort as well.
Excellent. Now, do you think that those guys would be interested in joining our working group if we do get approval from the TOC to talk about eventing here?
Potentially, or to the extent that we end up, I don't know if we are considering a second sub-track here for eventing, or if we're just going to shift the entire conversation to eventing later. To the extent that we shift entirely to eventing, or we have a separate call for eventing, yeah, probably so.
Okay, cool. Yeah, that's actually one of the questions I had for the TOC is what would be their preference? Brand new working group, sub-working group, or just repurpose this one for that? That's something for the TOC to decide, I think. All right. For anybody else who's on the TOC call, any other comments?
Sorry, this is Dan Kahn. I just want to say, although it's up to the TOC to decide, they're definitely going to be interested in this group's consensus on what to do. And so my preference would be to just repurpose this to avoid needing new repos and votes and other sorts of things.
Yeah, that was my preference as well. So let's actually, that's a good idea, Dan. Let's actually make it explicit. What do people think about us going forward with the proposal of just repurposing this group? Is there any concern with that or objection?
It feels like a natural graduation to me.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, it's simpler.
Hey guys, this is Austin Collins here. I also feel like this is a natural progression. I think that there are other areas that we should focus on as well if we're going to get into the topic of coming up with some common specifications that all vendors can adopt, like what does a standard or what does a common function package look like. I think that there are a lot of topics here. And while I'm all for keeping it simple and kind of aggregating everything into the same working group, I just want to call out and voice earlier, I think that this will expand as we get into more topics. So maybe keep it simple for now and then break it up when it's when there are just too many topics to have a single conversation or a single call based on.
Okay, that makes sense to me.
Yeah, but I'll point out that work groups are always welcome to do more calls or subtopics or anything. It's just stuff that requires a TOC vote that I'm particularly sensitive to try and minimize and go in with consensus if possible.
Yep. Okay.
Any other comments about the TOC call? All right, moving on. I just remembered right before the call that I don't think I ever actually wrote down sort of the next steps for us in terms of the documents. I think we talked about things like moving the document, the white paper itself, into Markdown, so it's part of our GitHub repo, and then people can issue PRs against it to make changes. I just want to make sure that everybody's is in agreement that that's going to be one of our next steps once we get agreement from the TOC that they do actually want this document to be something that is long-lived and not just tossed out. Were there other AIs or action items people can think of that I'm forgetting? Because I think we agreed to keep the landscape as a Google spreadsheet. But were there other things people can remember? Okay, I'm not hearing any. Thank you. I just want to make sure I didn't forget that. I'll take the AI to make sure that we do that at some point after the TOC does their stuff. All right, so next topic is the eventing stuff. Austin, you're on. You want to update us on where things are relative to those offline discussions that you were planning on having?
Yes, I've been working with all the people who have expressed interest in being a stakeholder in this effort. There is no shortage of interest. There's a lot of people from major cloud providers interested. Now we're getting a lot of interest from SaaS companies that publish events or have webhooks implementations. And Lee, also, if you could connect me to anyone who's interested in this in the Open Metrics group, that would be great. I think now we just need to get organized. So I've been doing some private calls with all the people who seem to be most passionate and a lot of the big cloud vendors, and trying to get a good sense of priorities that they'll need to actually implement this, things we'll have to address first, and then create a better scope, focus area for the specification itself. And I hope to have that after kind of a working session that we're going to have next week. So by the end of next week, I'm hoping to have a new PR to submit to GitHub, and it's going to better outline priorities, initial focus area, the initial scope. And then I think I just going to need some help scaling it out to support all the people who want to participate.
All right, cool. Any questions for Lee? I'm sorry, Austin?
So, Austin, you meant to follow up. Go ahead, Ort.
Sorry, there are some issues that we still need to consolidate within the document. Yaron, I think, had some comments regarding the open events, trying to reconcile everything into one proposed document. So that still requires some work, hopefully next week.
Sure, yes. Yep, yeah, I've been working with Yaron. He's contributed a bunch of great suggestions. And I've been putting them into what will be our next pull request to the serverless working group, so kind of the next version of the proposal. So I'll keep working on those issues and getting them in there.
Okay.
All right, Dan, were you going to say something?
Yeah, Austin, you mentioned there's a meeting next week, or was that what was that exactly?
We actually have a in-person event happening next week, where we've brought together, a few of the people who have been pretty passionate about this. It's taking place in Seattle. It's mostly going to be a conversation around priorities and scope, and figuring out how to design this whole effort and scale it so that it can embrace more people. So from that, we hope to produce something, a new version of the specification, and post it to GitHub. And hopefully from there, we'd like to do weekly calls. It sounds like we could organize those within the serverless working group, which will help out a whole bunch. And open it up for public comments, suggestions, feedback, all that.
I suspect one of the next obvious questions is, since there's a face-to-face going on, is this open to the public face-to-face, or are you trying to keep it to limited invite-only kind of thing?
Right now, there's a lot of people in there, and my general concern is just keeping it productive and getting people aligned. I think there's a lot of different interests, a lot of different requests that people have for this, and my goal is just to get everybody aligned on a simple scope and find the common priorities that people have, turn that into a simple scope as like a starting point for this whole effort. So that's like the basis of the meeting. I'm not sure if we want to open it up and have people dial in yet. There's just going to be a lot of people right now. So I think we're going to keep this one private.
Okay. Any other comments or questions for Austin?
I guess, Austin, of that forthcoming pull request, how much different does the schema look in that new pull request as versus what's under the WG serverless repo today?
To be honest, we haven't made any schema changes at all. We've just been focused on identifying the priorities now that we have more people who've expressed interest in this, and drawing out that initial scope. We will probably get into the schema a bit next week, but it's still all going to be very early. But most of our conversation will be around scope, what everyone's priorities are. We'll have some schema changes, and then the next goal is just to get it out on GitHub where everybody can provide input.
Okay.
All right, anything else?
regarding the schema changes, we propose some schema changes to the API, Austin. We, as in Yaron and myself, specifically that the metadata could be set externally to the data itself. So stuff like content type, where you don't need to serialize everything into a large JSON, and you can do protobuf and other serialization methods. So we would like to get those into the spec in order to us to take out our proposal.
Sure. Yep, that's what Yaron had communicated to me as well, and we're going to get there. So we'll keep working on it. Again, we really haven't touched any schema changes yet. The conversation has just been about getting people to the same table, outlining priorities, and figuring out what the initial scope of this effort is. So I think we'll talk about that a bit next week, but the goal is just to get something out on GitHub, and then I think people will be able to propose stuff more easily.
All right. Any other questions, comments? All right, cool. Thank you very much, Austin. Oh, go ahead.
Actually, one last comment. I think it would be great to get the first call on the calendar for this effort, which everybody who's interested can participate.
Well, so I was assuming that we would just sort of take over this Thursday call at this time. Obviously, we'll have one next week, skipping the week after that because it's Thanksgiving week, but then continue on the 30th. Is that not sufficient?
I think it'll work. Let's start there. I think that people can talk about this stuff for a very long time. At least that's what I've seen. Even just going over the schema, there's just a lot of stuff to talk about in there. But yeah, let's use the serverless working group call first, and we'll see if we need to break it out into a separate call if necessary.
Okay, sounds good.
Are we staying with a weekly call or going bi-weekly again once the document is being finalized?
Well, I think based upon what I'm hearing and the amount of interest in the eventing stuff, I suspect we're probably going to want a weekly call because I think there's going to be a lot of activity on that.
Yeah.
Correct me if you guys think I'm wrong.
Yeah, I've sat in plenty of these meetings already where we've gone over the schema, and the technical conversations around it can go on indefinitely. So there's a lot of stuff to talk about in there.
Yeah. Right. All right, cool. Okay, moving on then. Next topic, face-to-face at CNCF/KubeCon. Now, I took the AI to try to get us a room for possible discussions, and we have one reserved for us on Wednesday evening. Oh, I forgot to put the time in here. I believe it's 8 p.m. It's room 1 located on the first level of the convention center. We have room for 20 people, and they asked us if we wanted to advertise this. And we basically came back and said no, not because we're trying to keep it private, but because we do want to have a productive discussion, and we were afraid that if we got swamped with 100 people, nothing would actually get done. So we decided not to advertise it. So we have tables for about 20 people. We will have a screen and projector if we need that. And what I'll do is I'll start a Google Doc or something for us to start gathering topics for discussion. My hunch is that it may end up being a working group session on eventing, but we'll have to see how that plays out. Are there any comments or questions about that, or suggestions for changes to the plan that I outlined?
I think that's the same, or it's right after the sponsor party that's going on.
Correct. I believe according to the schedule, the sponsor party ends at 8:10, so ours starts at 8 o'clock, which is basically the same time.
Okay, so hopefully vendors won't have conflicts with that time.
Hopefully, yeah. All right. Anything else?
I'm also in support. I'm also in support of a working group session on eventing there. I think it'll be a great time just to meet everybody face to face and sit down and continue to work on this thing. As far as advertising it, I think it's a unique opportunity to just kind of do initial introductions and meet people who are interested in this effort overall. I don't know. I agree that the working session isn't the right place for that, but I'd love to have have some public visibility for this so that we can go out and talk to all the people and meet all the people who might be interested in this. I don't know what that looks like yet, just kind of throwing that out there.
Yeah,
but
just
I
let
think
you know.
20 people is already within the working group, so 20 people is not that much.
Yeah, I know that there's at least one session at the conference itself that will talk about this working group and what our future plans are. So there's a little bit of advertisement there. I don't think we're necessarily going to mention the face-to-face that evening. Again, just to keep the number of people to a reasonable amount. But you're probably right, Austin. At some point, we probably should make some sort of public announcement telling people if they're interested in the eventing side of things that they should join the working group, so they don't think it's just about the white paper that we were doing in the past. So.
Yeah, let's keep the conversation going on this, and as we make more progress, hopefully we'll figure out what to do at the conference.
Okay. Anything else relative to the face-to-face at KubeCon and CNCFCon? All right. Only other thing I have on the agenda is agreement on the next set of calls, which you already sort of touched on. I heard agreement that we're going to keep the weekly meetings, the same time slot on Thursdays, skipping the one in 2 weeks, which is Thanksgiving week here in the US, so the attendance will probably be pretty slim anyway. But is there any comments or objection to heading down that plan or heading down that path? Okay. In that case, are there any other topics people would like to bring up at all for today's call?
Just maybe a short piece of clarification. I get where Austin's trying to almost like it's like starting a fire. You've got to be really gentle with how much oxygen you give it initially or not, but also understanding that we're on the tail end of the white paper effort and kind of our landscape effort, and that conversations will probably naturally turn to eventing like in a week. I guess, Doug, as you go to start that other document and write up some topics, maybe this will come out of there, but I suspect we'll have a hard time not focusing the discussion towards events next Thursday and towards events at the face-to-face. And so I guess just sensing some reservation on kind of how many people and kind of what format to do that within. I thought I'd give a sort of a pre-warning that I suspect will be hard to keep people from discussing it. So anything that we can do, Austin, Doug, to steward and shape that, I want to try to do that now.
So I want to make sure I understand your concern there, Lee. Are you concerned that if people want to talk about something other than eventing, they may get pushed out of the conversation?
No, I'm thinking, hey, we're running kind of dry on some of the other topics, and that people will probably have a natural inclination to bring up the eventing. And so if the way in which we want to steward, like shape or steward the eventing discussions, now or kind of before next Thursday is a good time to try to draw the box for how we would like for us to have that those discussions, or outline what some of those goals are.
Yeah, I'm kind of assuming that between Austin's upcoming PR and the latest version of whatever document that it's related to, along with the proposed topics for the face-to-face, where I'm kind of assuming people are going to write down eventing specific topics, we'll be able to take those things and create a list of proposed topics around that, or from that, I should say.
Yes, I have a suggestion here too. I think we're going to have a clear scope. We're going to have clear priorities by next week. Maybe I could have some time to chat on that next call and just give people a basic introduction and the reasoning behind why we think this is a good scope to start with. And then we could kind of see how things go organically from there.
Sounds good to me. All right.
One other comment on this. Again, I think that there's room for other kind of common specifications within the general serverless category. Standard function packages. I know we've been working on this stuff for a while. I'm not sure if anyone else wants to take the lead on these ideas. I know that there's, probably some of these topics people have been considering within the OpenFast project, probably what Chad's doing with the FN project. But there's certainly a lot of stuff to discuss here, and it's not limited to just events. And I don't want to totally take over the serverless working group with just events and kind of eclipse all these other things that we should also be talking about. So I'm not sure if anyone on this call has particular interest in taking a lead on that. We've got some initial ideas on what that stuff could look like, but yeah, open to working with anyone on that.
So I personally wouldn't mind having sort of a list of additional topics that we want to consider for, I don't want to use the S word, harmonization or some sort of level of interop agreement going forward. But I seem to recall in previous calls, there was a little bit of a concern that if we tried to tackle too much, it would just be basically just too much to do all at once and parallelize it. So we're looking to serialize just a little bit. Now, it doesn't mean we have to be completely serialized with everything. But there was some concern that we may spread ourselves too thin if we try to do too many things at one time, and that eventing was probably the right thing to start off first. But I do think it would be useful to at least enumerate all the other topics.
Right, yeah, and I raise a lot of those concerns because that's the feedback I've gotten directly from all these stakeholders. All this is a lot for them to digest and to consider all at once. So definitely in favor of keeping the conversation focused on events. I just want to bring it to everyone's attention that there are other concepts that we should be considering at some point in the near future.
Yep.
Yeah, and this is Chad. Even if not in person during the working group sessions, we could do something maybe in a doc asynchronously. So I'd be happy to take the lead on some of that. We've been thinking a lot about function signatures and standardized inputs and stuff like that. So it's something that I'm happy to take on, but I'm just getting my feet on the ground, so I won't commit to too much until I kind of figure out what's going on.
Fair enough.
But Doug, if you can share that doc, once you share that doc with everyone, I'll put some ideas into it in terms of other ideas we're thinking around potential standardizations, and we can start maybe contributing asynchronously.
Yep. Harmonization.
Harmonization.
The S word is a bad word to some people. You got to be careful. Yes. All right. Any other topics? All right, cool. In that case, everybody gets back 30 minutes of their day. Thanks again, guys, and we'll talk next week. Oh, or don't forget, Tuesday, I think it's 11 a.m. Eastern, is a TOC call if you're interested in hearing that discussion. And we'll talk next week. Thanks, guys.
Thanks all.
Bye.
Bye.
Great. Thanks, everyone.
Ciao.